Kia ora and welcome to International Women's Day 2022. We're so glad that you've joined us here tonight. We've got a fabulous session that will be running to about 7:45, but we want to invite some questions as well. So if you've got any of those, in fact, you can start to ask away as we're kind of chatting, but really casually chatting tonight about breaking the bias. That is the theme of this year's International Women's Day. Every year they pick something kind of different that we need to kind of think about and focus on and understand that that's something that we've got to change our thinking about in order to advance generally as women. And tonight we're obviously talking about money, all things money and investing. And so I've got the right crew with me here tonight who I'm going to introduce you to shortly. But just on breaking the bias, it's kind of those deeply held beliefs that we've got that we could be, conscious of and blurt out loud and be corrected by our 15-year-old daughters, or it could be something that is unconsciously held and is just kind of deep rooted and you don't recognize that you've got it until a thought pattern emerges or you read something and it stares you in the face. And so we're chatting tonight about biases of women and money and investing, and we're looking to break it. And actually disprove some of the unconscious and conscious beliefs that women have about money. And we're here to celebrate women and actually our superpowers as investors and all those fantastic things. Just a quick note that we're not going to give any advice. This is general chat. So if you've got a personal situation or a really specific question, there are some fantastic financial advisors out there. Just seek someone that's got the ability to give that to you. We're just speaking generally here. If we speak about a particular share or a fund, we're just using it as an example, not suggesting you go and invest in it, but just use it as research. And then finally, if you've got any really tricky questions about Hatch, about tax or what we do, then please do reach out to hello@hatchinvest.nz. Our fabulous crew will be happy to help and answer some of your trickier questions. So I just want to introduce this fabulous lineup that I've got tonight. And firstly, I'll start with, well, I guess myself. I am one of the co-founders of Hatch. Hatch is an investing platform. And we really are around to help Kiwis build meaningful wealth. And we do wake up every day pretty passionate about that. Got a fabulous co-founder with me on the call tonight. And that's Natalie, who's our Chief Experience Officer. And she is, a renegade that has been kind of kicking women biases to the curb from a very young age. I would call Nat like the ultimate. I'm not reading her bio, by the way, because it's like,
I'm like, keep going, Kristen. No, stop.
I'm just like winging this. No, but she is. She's like kind of just proved every single myth out there about females. From starting a business at 19 to exiting multiple businesses to investing in the zero IPO as a very young female. All this incredible things kind of firsts and stuff. So Nat is the ultimate disruptor. Love having her as part of Hatch and really happy to have her with us tonight. And then we get to the lovely Tracey Cross. Tracey, give everyone a wave. She is, I would call Tracey the OG renegade of all things women and investing. She's been doing this for a long time. And that's why we wanted to have you on, Tracey, because we really do look up to the, I suppose, the barriers that you've been busting for a long time here in New Zealand. She loves gender equality and has proven that, in the business world. She's championing programs that support women, elevating financial literacy, diversity, and inclusion is her bag. She had to tell me what D&I meant the other week. I was like, Tracey, what's D&I? But she is, again, the ultimate champion of all things diversity and inclusion. She is currently the chair of Women in Super and co-chair of the Financial Services Council's Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. So we've loved getting to know Tracey and working with her a little bit on some of the cool FSC stuff. And then we've got Simran Kaur with us. Sim is one half of the very well-known podcast, Girls That Invest. And she does that with Sonia Guptan. The pair are on a mission to supercharge female financial literacy, remove investing barriers, bridge the gender gap. In fact, all things that we can relate to. They have become, in the past couple of years, the world's #1 podcast. They're followed, their investing education podcast, which is fabulous if you haven't listened to it, followed by over 100,000 women, minorities, and people who have traditionally felt like investing isn't for them. And actually, last month she was featured in Vogue India, and we saw that, and she looked fabulous and doing fabulous things. So glad to have you ladies with us tonight to chat about all things women, money, biases. And I just want to hand it over to you in no specific order. If you could just tell me what's going on in your lives that's exciting you at the moment, and tell me the last book that you read. It's a double up.
Okay, shall I start?
Yeah,
jump in. Okay, hi. Thanks very much for having me. This is really exciting. And happy International Women's Day, everyone. The most exciting thing that's happening in my world at the moment is the fact that having left a large law firm that I've been with for 20 years, at the end of last year, I'm now practicing on my own account. It never fails to amaze me how good that feels, and the wonderful opportunities that are coming to me. So just a small call out, thank you to everyone who supported me through that process, because it truly has been amazing. Last book that I've read, having actually finished a book over the Christmas that my daughter bought me. I'm a bit of a Brene Brown, dare I say it, fan. So have been reading Atlas of the Heart, and love that because it's really talking about how our emotions govern how we experience things, and if we understand them, we can actually look to the choices that we make. So I think that's so sort of relevant in this day and age, and how we can do things better and business better. So that's me.
Love it. Over to you, Sim.
Hi, my name is Simran, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor, and that was a very sweet introduction, so thank you. In terms of what I'm excited for, I'm going overseas tomorrow for the first time in 3 years. I think the first time for a lot of people it would be. So that's exciting. I'm going to Melbourne just for a couple of days. And in terms of the last book I read, I've just finished Think and Grow Rich, which is a very old book, I would say, and it's kind of about mindset and growing your wealth through the different ways that you can think, and very interesting book. I don't know what I quite think of it. I don't know if you guys have read it, but
so would you recommend it yet?
I think it's a book worth reading. I don't know if it's a book I would take away too much from.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure if that's a ringing endorsement. Thanks, Sim. That's awesome. Nat, over to you. What are you excited about?
I'm answering both my questions in one, and Kristen, you'll regret asking this question, because we've been sort of in self-imposed lockdown for a couple of weeks to try and still follow an elimination strategy. I should have taken my nail polish off. I moved to the beach with a couple of friends to stay here. So somehow we've sort of ended up forming a cult, which is excellent. And that is a really exciting thing that's happening in my life. And we've taken up a lot of different mental health activities, including journaling and reading. So that ties into the book that I most recently read. We're on to our second one now about boundaries, but our first one was emotional agility, and all about mindset and not having a fixed opinion on yourself, and having a growth mindset. And we laughed our way through it when we group read it, but actually I've taken a lot out of it. And I think it's just a kind of nice reminder every now and again that it is worth spending a bit of time thinking about your mind space, and taking like 15 minutes a day to focus on yourself and a little bit of self-improvement. So sorry, Kristen, I know that's probably not the answer you wanted, but
it's only because Nat is forcing all of us to journal as well. So there is something cult-like about the commune that she's currently living in. But no, we do love them dearly. And yay, that's so cool. Let's just like kick into some of these beliefs or lies that we've been told. And I wonder if maybe Tracey, if you could share a money lie that you've heard yourself or about women when it comes to money.
Well, I think an oldie, but which unfortunately still seems around, is that a man is a financial plan, which, my goodness, they are certainly not. that they don't necessarily know what they're doing. Women are better investing, and we'll talk about that sort of, further on. And, I do see and I hear stories about even if women aren't considering the men as a financial plan, they are not participating in sort of the decisions, around the finances in the home. So, automatically almost allowing them to be the financial plan. We do live longer than men, etc. More women are on their own and sort of retirement, etc. So we really do need to sort of step up. So that's a real biggie. It's not right. We've got the ability to do things ourselves.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Nat?
Mine is spending. I've spoken through Hatch to so many women who tell me that they're a spendaholic and they have terrible spending habits. And when I've dug into it, absolutely without fail, I found that they're actually really, really sensible spenders. And it's either a lack of income, and the reality of the world as it stands today, especially in New Zealand, is that life is expensive, and that doesn't make you a bad spender. But I was really shocked after doing that research ourselves to read an article not that long ago that said, despite the gender pay gap, and women do get paid, I think in New Zealand on average 9% lower than men, we actually day-to-day are better off, which means women are actually the exact opposite of that bias, that women aren't spenders. We actually are much better at conserving and using, doing more with less.
Yeah. And Sim, what about a lie that you've heard or believed at one time?
I think probably the lie that, I guess it kind of ties into the other two, but the idea that, we don't have a money mindset, or that we, some people say, I'm just not good with numbers. And I used to be that person as well. And then you kind of learn that it's not just about the numbers, and there's calculators now online that are really helpful when it comes to your money and your budgeting and investing. And it really does come down to kind of self-beliefs. And I don't blame women for having those beliefs. I think we've kind of been groomed in a way to kind of see men as the financial planners in our lives. If you look at the statistics around money articles about men are how to save and how to make deals, and the photos that they use are like, men in suits with notebooks. And if you look at the money articles towards women, it's about how to save $10 off your grocery bill. And this girl has like hacked her way into like a coupon, mania. And even the photos they use of women, if you look at the research, it's a woman holding piggy banks or holding coins. And it's these really subtle messages that I think play into that. But that was a huge bias that I experienced myself.
And kind of on that, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Nat.
I was going to say, do you have one, Kristen?
Maybe the spending one resonated with me. I kind of declare myself as a spender, and that's okay. And there's kind of nothing I can, so I don't know. So I just have to put in, knowing that I do spend, I just have to put some frameworks around, like pay myself first. So I just know that I treat myself like a bill, and I kind of invest first, when I get paid. And then I don't have to feel that guilt associated with spending. So I'm like, yes, I'm a spender, but, because I know there are people that do save very well, and that's not me. Like historically, well, it is because I am doing it, but I just have to put those practices in place. That's all. So maybe just the lie that being a spender is a bad thing, because it's actually not. Like, I love my life. I have a great life, and like I wouldn't trade the adventures I have, or the part, the things that I'm doing for, I wouldn't trade that for anything. So for me, it's just about having that, but also ensuring that I'm my first bill. So now, Sim, you kind of chatted about one of the lies that you, that was one of the lies with numbers that you believed. What were some of your formative experiences with money and investing, and what type of kind of emotions were attached to that?
I very specifically remember, and at such a young age, so I'm surprised it happened, but I was in my third year of primary school, so I might have been like 7 years old, and a girl that I was friends with told me that her dad had explained what the numbers meant on the 6 p.m. news. I don't know if you remember, but they would show like, ASB was up 0.5 and this was down. And she said, my dad taught me what that meant. And I was like, oh, well, I want to learn. So I went home that night and I asked my dad, and I said, what do those numbers mean? And he couldn't quite explain it. And now looking back, I don't think he knew it well himself. And I took that as, well, I just can't understand it, so it's too hard for me. And I just put it in the too hard basket, as opposed to, this is something I can learn. Maybe I just need a different teacher, or maybe I need to look at a different medium of learning. And that same experience happened when I was in university. Very similar. Someone talked to me about investing. The first instance that I didn't understand it, I said, no, not for me. And it wasn't till later on, near the end of my university degree, where I actually gave it a go, tried different mediums to understand it, and kind of went, oh, this is not that hard.
Yeah, that's all. Well, we can forgive you in year 3 for not going to find other mediums, but thankfully now there are many to learn from, many awesome ones. What about you, Tracey? Do you remember any kind of defining moment?
Well, I think, my sort of upbringing, I mean, it's ironic just listening to that, because my father was a bank manager. So you would have thought we might have had some conversations in the home around finances, but we didn't. Well, to be perfectly honest, we didn't really talk about much at all. So we really didn't, I wasn't exposed to anything. And then I think I sort of moved from sort of school to really focused on needing a career. I didn't even know what that sort of meant. So I was off to university to get a law degree because I wanted this career. And I think I sort of had that whole thing. I needed to work hard. I needed to work hard to make money without a real sort of understanding around what that really meant to me. So I think it's a bit like, it's late in the later years of really sort of taking an interest, and certainly more so since, I had a daughter. So Saskia is 15 years now, and that's really honed my focus around sort of financial literacy, women's empowerment, diversity, inclusion, etc. And I think that's, it comes from, I guess, an approach of putting everyone else first before me. So I'm really keen of encouraging financial literacy and people having these conversations. And I certainly didn't have for quite a large portion of my life.
Yeah. Agreed. Nat, what about you?
I don't think there was a defining moment, but I've been thinking about this a lot, because I'm one of a very unusual person in that I don't have a lot of emotions tied to money. And I've been thinking about what it is purely, like, again, through Hatch, to sort of think, what is it as a parent, especially when we launch kids accounts, can parents do to pass on to their children? And I think there was like sort of 3 good things my parents did and 1 work on. And the good things were, they never had a scare. Like, my dad was in the military and my mum couldn't work because we moved around a lot. So that was sort of where we were at. We weren't a wealthy family. We weren't, but we had a definite amount of privilege. But they never shared a scarcity mindset. So like in the school holidays, I remember we had a blast and we'd be playing in the backyard and we'd be going on adventures. And like, I remember a lot of people going to the movies and stuff, and we never did. But my mum never said we couldn't afford it. She just had she just came up with different activities. So I think I never grew up feeling like I was deprived. They very much talked a lot about money, and they were investors themselves, and they took a chance. Like, they were always quite good at saying, like, we want to invest in this thing, and we would all be involved in the conversation, and then they'd go do it. So I kind of grew up with this idea that money is something that is not scary to grow. And then the third thing that they did was, mum's very much an entrepreneur. So we worked from very young, but in like little side hustles, like we walked dogs and we sold Easter chocolates, and I sold trumpets at the Christmas in the Park in Auckland. And so I learnt the value of $1 very early, because I had to work for it. And then the one work on, which I think is something that's especially relevant for parents these days, is when I left school, it was expected that I'd go to university. Neither of my parents could. So that was a huge privilege that they felt they could provide me. But after uni, there was an expectation that I would go into a normal job, and sort of that like doctor, lawyer, accountant. And I started my business, and that was like not great from their perspective to start, because it felt scary. And I think the jobs of the future are going to be like that. They haven't been invented yet. So yeah, so to me, those are the kind of the defining I suppose, framework around why I think I've ended up in this boat, that I don't feel like I subscribe to most of the biases and fears and emotions that a lot of people have.
Yeah, and I would probably be the opposite in that I grew up with single parent home. Dad was out of work in a cyclical job kind of type of role that he was in. And it was, scarcity was a thing, even though they didn't want to make it a thing. You just knew it was a thing, not going on school field trips or whatever. And so there was a huge amount of shame. I had to shop at consignment clothing stores when it wasn't cool. So this is back when the vintage wasn't expensive. Now it's like really expensive. My daughter wants me to pay $65 for a used t-shirt. I'm like, no, that's ridiculous.
I feel like that shame has because schools used to be atrocious. Like, I've met up with some friends from school since then, and exactly that, not being able to go on school trips and the shame that was thrown at children.
And so studies have shown that as adults we self-sabotage because we never felt worthy. There's a huge amount of shame with money. So I would definitely consider myself in that category. And so investing wasn't for me, and taking care of myself and growing wealth, wasn't for me. That was kind of yuck, but getting out of that is nice. We've probably got a lot of people watching that are curious about some faves or go-tos in terms of learning about investing. So brushing up on skills if they've already started, how to take their next step. Do you guys have some, I mean, obviously Sim's got some great ones, but like Tracey, do you have some favorite books or go-tos that you've kind of found really invaluable when it comes to learning?
Well, I think the Retirement Commissioner's sorted site, Diana Crossan set that up years ago with the little mouse, which is very cute, made, sort of a whole lot of information really accessible in those sort of days, and it's still sort of going. So I always sort of refer people to that. But there's just so many resources. Money Hub has just a whole myriad of information. There's amazing, podcasts. We're not short of resources. And I think that the important thing is just to sort of start a conversation within your group. We should be talking about these things more easily than what we do. And I guess, coming back to the earlier point, it's because of these beliefs that we've formed, often sort of, in our childhood, that we just need to sort of share and move forward from.
Any tips on what would be the icebreaker? Because I've heard about money conversations, but what is that kind of icebreaker where you're like, this, doesn't feel too awkward, or about that convo?
I think it's to me, it's not necessarily talking about money. It's talking about ourselves. It's talking about our lives, what we're doing, what we're experiencing. It's actually being open to have a vulnerable conversation with good friends. How many conversations do you have with friends around, like really honest, where you can talk about money and your situation, rather than this bravado we all put on that, I'm the lawyer and I'm the partner and I'm this and that, and behind those doors it can be completely different, killer fish. So I think it's about actually just being vulnerable and having a great sort of team around you where you can have that conversation and ask curious questions.
I love that, because often you hear these tips and then you're like, but how do you actually do it? But that's such a cool tip. Hey, Nat, what about some favorite resources of yours?
I'm going to tie this back to breaking biases, because I think a couple of them are, in my experience investing, which is almost 20 years in now, the idea that there's one way to invest and that you have to know numbers at all to invest, which is just like not true. I was fine at maths, but I have never used it once when it came to investing. And then with the particular way to pick investments and to invest, and there's a lot of P ratios and all that sort of stuff. Never used them, never done it. So I think for me, the way I learn about investing is kind of what Tracey said, through conversations and being vulnerable and asking questions and being curious. I've had a huge amount of conversations where someone, maybe it's in the tech industry, but I think it's all the time. Someone will tell you about a company they love. Like, they might have just bought some new shoes, if it's Allbirds or Nike or whatever. And that sparks a conversation about, like, what is this company about? What do you like about them? And I personally believe that a lot of investing is about storytelling. It's the story behind these incredible brands and these incredible people. Like, we all work, we all have jobs, and if you love your job and you are motivated to get up every day, you understand what it takes to grow a company like that, and what goes, and that's all it is. It's a bunch of people coming together to create value. And so learning the stories behind a company and really believing in them is my way of investing. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, as you know, Kristen. I like Business Wars and How I Built This because I love the human side. I actually haven't read Barefoot Investor, but I have interviewed a lot of people who that was a changing point in their life, and it's just almost because he's broken it down into just these really simple things that you again can action. And I think again, and this is probably not a bias, this is a behavior. But a lot of women tend to learn, never action when it comes to money. So I love things like Barefoot Investor and what we do, which is very much action focused. But yeah, I think that for me, that's the key thing is there is no one right way. You don't need maths. And actually, there are some incredible epic stories and battles going on in businesses. And like you said, Sim, it's not the stuff that's shown on the 6 o'clock news about the numbers. Like I still don't understand what they mean. It's a totally different view of the same thing.
Can I just say before I ask Sim, Nat, when I was hearing you speak, I read this really cool article last night on Financial Times, FT.com, and it was about Kathy Wood. Kathy Wood is one of the she had this stellar investment manager she has called ARK Invest, the stellar investment company. 2021 was an incredible year for her. In fact, I think she was like one of the top performing investment management companies of that year. She's and she is a conviction investor. And so reading about this story, she actually started as a financial analyst and all that stuff, but she is a massive conviction investor. And so all of her critics kind of suggest she doesn't do enough deep diving into like the business valuation, but it's because she's looking 10 years down the road and how humans are living, how we might live down the road, and who's innovating and how they're innovating. So she is a massive conviction investor. And it did remind me of your approach, and that it is as intelligent, Nat, because you're investing in the pioneers of tomorrow, not talking about maybe blue chip companies that, whatever, or maybe you are, but I see you very much in that space when I read that, which was kind of interesting. But Sim, tell me about kind of your favorite, and feel free to give your obviously resources a shout out as well.
Well, in terms of podcasts, I would say the Girls That Invest podcast is always a fun place to start when it comes to investing. Disclaimer, I run it. But in terms of different places that I personally enjoy, I like to read the news a lot, and it doesn't have to be the news about investing, even just the BBC, Reuters, or CNBC, those kind of websites. I just read for fun. And so if you like the news, you end up picking up a little bit of information anyway about companies. So-and-so's company did this or did that, or they're going to be acquired. Sorted is a really good resource as well, and we really love the fact that it's so user-friendly. And there's one more website that I love called investopedia.com, which is US-based, but any definition you have, if you ever see a word, and I still see words that I sometimes don't know the meaning of, if you type it in, they always have good examples of explaining it. And so it's almost like a great sort of glossary.
And if I could just add one to Investopedia, and that would be the balance, because sometimes the odd time with Investopedia, and that's, I think it's thebalance.com or something. And sometimes with Investopedia, if I don't quite understand, like some of their ratio stuff is pretty intense. And then I'll go such and such, the balance, like whatever term it is, the balance. And I just find sometimes it's just a nice softer angle to start with. Like it's a bit of a soft landing pad. And I think the combination of those for me personally is really powerful. So yeah, love it. Can I just ask, like, what's the thing that you're working towards? Is there something big that you are putting your money to work for at the moment? Something specific, or is it just the future? Tracey?
Well, for me, I mean, I don't mean to sound sort of vague, but it's about that freedom of choice. It's not a, it's not a figure. It's not about sort of necessarily the money. It's about having enough to give me the choice that I want for myself and my family. And I remember this is years ago when we first established Women in Super. So I'm talking 20 years ago, hearing a story about a retiree that, who because she had some money, sort of saved in a small amount, that gave her the choice as to whether, and this seemed a crazy scenario to even contemplate, whether she was able to afford to have a home or she went to the local pool. Now that just to me, and look, that's 20 years ago, and I still remember that. And to me, it's not getting caught up in these big figures. It's about what you want to do with your life. As you sort of ask, what you want to achieve, what is your goal, what's going to get you there. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, I want to make $10 million, etc. But that's not necessarily going to, what does that bring you? Because it's not necessarily happiness. So that's where I'm at.
10 million would bring me happiness. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Okay. I wouldn't say we're feeling
I'm far from it, but it would bring me happiness. Okay, Nat, what about you? Is there
I want to ask you a question first, Kristen. Why would 10 million bring you happiness? What would you do with it?
Oh, let me tell you. I would just have homes in different places. Like I would have a little place. I'd have a little place in northern Italy. I would have a place in Whistler, Canada for snowboarding season. I would have a little surf shack. I mean, come on. I will spend 10 million, no problem. I told you I'm a spender. And that will make me happy.
I think I have a weird thing about too much money. I think I feel like it creates its own problems. I think because I'm probably
There's something in your childhood there.
Yeah. I feel like for me it's very similar to Tracey, and I think my motivation started off probably negatively with realizing very early on the importance of money as a control tool over your own life, and that so easily, if you hand over the financial reins to someone, or if you merge them, or if you don't have control over your money, you don't have control over your life. And yes, maybe we should smash the patriarchy and smash the capitalist system, but we can't probably smash either of them individually right now. So while we're in the system, I think money is control over your own life. So that was kind of how I started to think about it, and then very much around choices. But I also think unlike Kristen with your $10 million, for me it's actually like the freedom to design your life. And it's something I've been thinking about after about 20 years of investing. It's not an overnight thing. I used to think there was an end goal that one day I would hit like this number, financial independence, and suddenly life would change. But what I've realized is actually it's a continuous path, and you hit different points, and you actually need to focus on what each of those points means to you. And so I think recently I feel like I've hit this point where I have more money now than I ever thought I would. I never thought of myself as someone who would have money. And what does that mean? And sort of, I joke about the cult, but like being able to leave town and come and live at the beach for a while, like that is an incredible level of freedom that I, a couple of years ago, would never have imagined I would be able to do. So it's not complete freedom. I'm not quitting my job. I don't want to. But it is like, what's the next thing? Is it like, can I just choose to take a couple of months off to go and journal or whatever? Like, it's those little points along the way where we could potentially have the ability to live a life like we never imagined. And it's pretty exciting to look at it like that. And I think most of us are limited by this idea of the 9 to 5, the get out of school, the get married, the settle down, the live in the suburbs, the working to fund this lifestyle. Whereas actually, to me, it could be like, what could the ultimate life look like? And for me, it doesn't need to be 10 million. It could just be these little choices that I get to make now. And 2 years ago, I did different ones. And in 2 years' time, I hope I get to make different ones. Like, that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, no, I love it.
I think we need to enjoy the journey along the way, don't we?
Yeah.
Because you put the goalpost out there, and that's where you think you want to get. Well, all sorts of things can happen before then.
Yeah.
You know, so if
Yeah.
you're not enjoying each moment and the process of learning and investing and talking about it and having some fun around it, then
Yeah.
you know, you might need to review what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, and also I think the other thing for me is like there's this perception, a bias about investing that it is inherently selfish. And I think one of the things that brings me the most joy is obviously in Ukraine at the moment, there's an awful invasion happening. And wouldn't it be great to be in a position that you could like actually, well, all of us can, we can donate, if nothing else, money. And you can't do that unless you have money. So it actually gives you the ability to change things and to contribute to society in a way that maybe you know, if you don't have it, you can't do.
Yeah. What about you, Sim? What are your immediate or long-term goals?
I think like growing up, money was definitely used or seen as something that if you had money, you had control or you had freedom, and if you didn't really get to make the calls in your life. And so that's kind of how I've grown up and why I value the importance of financial literacy so much. Because to me, when I was younger and probably more naive, and I probably still am naive, when I was a lot younger, I used to think, I want to have X amount of dollars in my bank account and that's going to make me happy. And I didn't really think why or how. But like as I've grown up, I think my mindset has completely shifted away from that, away from a dollar figure and more towards the idea of, well, now money is a way to have freedom. And if I we always talk to our community members about this. If you are in a job where you don't feel comfortable, if you're in a relationship that's maybe not as safe, where you feel disrespected, if you don't have the finances to leave, that's a very big barrier for a lot of people, and especially women. And so when you have, something to stand on, you're suddenly more in control of your life. And I think that's probably what I've always wanted to aim for, and I guess probably have somewhat achieved, where the shots that I make or the calls I make in my life are based on what I want to do because I have the financial means to back myself.
And if you were to demystify this investing, just as a kind of things, Sim, what is the superpower of it? Why do it? Which might lead me to kind of like how and next, but kind of what actually is it?
It's a good question. I think there was that study that came out not too long ago about how, I think it was by ASB last year, and they said that women are better savers despite earning less. I'm pretty sure Nat sort of touched on that at the start as well. And so we are good savers. We put it in the bank accounts and we think that makes us good with money. But with investing, there's this thing called compound interest. And compound interest is the idea that your money can grow a little bit faster. The interest can gain interest year by year. And when you compare the way that we put money in a bank account versus investing in terms of the long term, one is so much more powerful in terms of reaching your goals faster than the other.
And Nat, leading on that, what would be do you want to just take it one step further, Nat, with that how do I start question that most people will have? Like, okay, I've kind of buy into this concept, but like, what's the thing I might start with?
I think, again, just like the number of ways you can choose what you invest in, there's a number of ways to start. But I think, like Tracey, we've had this conversation before with Kristen, the key is actually taking action. And we've talked a lot about investing can feel like an absolute mountain. Like it feels like such a big thing in front of you. But like with everything, if you can just break it down into a series of small steps, it's just really not that scary. So there's obviously the idea of like your first step might be actually sitting down and reading a book, reading The Barefoot Investor, there's a multitude of books. Not one that makes you feel stupid, because a lot of them do, because as soon as you drop some financial terms into anything, you immediately, if you don't understand what they mean, you feel stupid. But it's just a world that invents a lot of them, and a lot of times, people move to shortcuts when they know a topic inside out. So if it's reading a book or listening to a podcast, start there. The other thing if you are more of a learn by doer, or if you're ready to feel to give it a start, is realize that you don't need to like blow your life savings on this. Like, that you can start, like, who cares about fees to start? You can start with $1, $5, $10, $100. We say $100, and the reason we say $100 is it's sort of like with anything, if you put a bit of money in that's actually a little bit painful to lose, you'll learn more, because you actually will take it really seriously. Whereas if you start with $1 or $5, it's sort of like, who cares? And you know, and you may not actually learn a lot. But just start with something that you are literally comfortable losing, and treat it as education money. And I think, again, going back to that behavior of women, that a lot of women spend a fortune educating themselves, but don't necessarily take action on that education when it comes to investing. So invest that education money in investing instead. And then I think also the third thing is actually back yourself a bit. And I heard this great quote a while ago, that if you've tried everything to be better with money and you haven't, go to therapy. And I love it, because I think there's something in there about we have such deep, and this is what today's all about, right? We have such deep-rooted biases about ourselves and money and worth and value, and where we sit in the world, and what our relationship should look like, and what our lives should look like, that actually it's worth sitting down and spending a bit of time going, like, why am I terrified to do this? Or why am I afraid to make the wrong choice and think that my husband's going to tell me off, or that I've ruined the family? And then I think the fourth thing for me is the idea that women, and it is a stereotype, but it's sort of semi-true, we don't like making mistakes. Women are pretty good at stuff, and we take a much more evidence-based approach to things, which is evident when it comes to investing. Women tend to research more. They tend to want to know that we're not risk averse, we're risk aware. We would like to weigh up the risks with the benefits. So recognize that's actually a bit of a superpower. And sort of back yourself and make a choice.
Yeah, I love that. Tracey, do you have kind of some have you heard stuff about women and investing and kind of superpowers that we might have when it comes to it, or studies that you've seen or research?
Oh, look, I agree with what Nat said, and I would actually start off with that whole, our superpower as our belief, our self-belief. We can do this. We're good at this. We just don't do enough of it. So, and I'd even bring in the old Nat's journaling, because I think that even sitting down, one of the things, the barriers, I think, is ourselves. We want to speaking from, my own experience, anything I don't want to do, bury your head in the sand and focus on everyone else and hope it goes away, but it doesn't. I think that unless we actually understand where our beliefs have come from in our own money story, unless we understand that and actually deal with it, we're not going to be able to take on all this knowledge and learning that we get to actually take action. So I think that there's a bit of a roadblock there, and it's not talked about. Whereas I think that's really the crux of it. We need to sort of get on, and we need to focus on this. I mean, as women, we have unique little challenges that we can overcome. We live longer, we paid less, we take time out to look after children, etc. That's all the reality. We can get over that. This is the good story, breaking the bias. We can do this. We're knowledgeable. We've got a long-term focus. We're very thoughtful, less driven by our egos and testosterone. We just need to sort of take the small steps to actually make the change.
Yeah, I love it. And Sim, just with your chatting with people or your research that you've made, what would be a reasonable start, do you think? And is it off the back of paychecks or whatever? Like, how can we ensure that we're investing enough, and what does that look like?
I think a good place to start, I think the mindset is key. That's a huge barrier. And, once you kind of have that checked off and you feel like you've done enough research where you're comfortable, we find that a lot of people are scared to take the next step because they're just not aware of how much is coming in, how much is going out, and they don't know. Rather than kind of looking at investing, like I'm going to put $100 away every month and that's a certain amount, I think sometimes we might start with, let's just see how much is left over at the end of the week and kind of chuck that in. And we like to talk about doing it the other way, and we call it paying yourself first, where you're putting in a certain amount away, and that goes away automatically, you know, regardless of what else is going on. But to know how much that is, you really need to know, you know, how much do you spend in a week, or how much do you spend in a month? How much do you earn, and what's the difference? And it's a bit of an annoying step, I would say. No one likes to look over their expenses and see what's going on. But once you do, or at least once I did, I found that was so helpful, because then I had a much clearer idea of what I could work with.
Yeah. And I think you can adjust it. You can adjust it as well. Go ahead, Tracey.
I was just going to say, once you understand that or got an idea, you can actually take action.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, I think when it comes to spending, because I completely agree with Kristen that, like, you can spend and have a great life and still, and Sim, like you just said, you pay yourself first. But one thing you can find in your expenses, if you're anything like me, is that if we love the idea of Marie Kondoing them, that the number of things I spend money on that I don't even remember the next day, like, you can cut that stuff. That stuff is not adding to Kristen's dream life. So
that's true. That I did Marie Kondo on my subscriptions, and then I was like, why am I paying for Apple TV? I finished whatever that football American game, whatever soccer game, something Ted. I don't know. Yeah, Ted Lasso. I was like,
I finished subscribed.
So I had to Marie Kondo my subscriptions, because, you know, I sign up to stuff when things happen. But anyway, but absolutely, I think that's great. But can I also just say that you can adjust it? Me personally, I started really aggressively investing into KiwiSaver, and then I had to backpedal a little bit, and I was able to change that just because I like KiwiSaver, and although I know it's locked away, whereas I also like investing where it doesn't feel as locked away. But I probably went a little bit too aggressive with the KiwiSaver. So I've just kind of changed that up now, and you can do that. And you can do that with your own investing as well. If you find you've started a bit too aggressively, you can pull that back. But I've read quite a bit. We should be working our way up to, you know, 10, 15% of our incomes. That should just be a thing. And that can be really daunting for some. But like Sim said, if it, and between the Marie Kondoing, demanding what we're worth, I think that's, you know, if you can't save money, we should be making more money. And so figuring out what our number is, what our worth is, and figuring out market values for kind of what we're being paid, and ensure that we're repaid that or higher than that. Demanding our worth, I think, is important. But then I think, it's simply a matter of, you know, definitely treating yourself like a bill as well. Fabulous. So what about, go.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that's another thing that women sometimes do, is they think 10 steps into the future, which serves us very well for most things in life. But when it comes to investing, we think 10 steps in the future and go, how will I get to 10, 15% of my salary? And then we don't start. And the starting point is like just that first $100.
100%.
Because you will get addicted. Like, this is a great addiction. You will do it. Like everyone does. You make your first investment, you start to get it, you learn. All that stuff sorts itself out. You do not need to think 10 steps ahead when it comes to investing.
Yeah,
you
no,
just
I agree.
need to do those tiny
but
little
I'll bet on that. And while I totally agree, because I don't want to be introducing a barrier, but can I just say, culturally in Canada, it was 10%. Like, no matter what job you were in, every paycheck, it was 10%. So I don't know how as a nation or as a culture we figured that out, but we just did. And it was so like that. Yeah. So I just find that really interesting that, definitely don't want to scare anyone away. But in New Zealand, we've got to kind of be, you know, pushing ourselves a little bit as well.
Absolutely.
What about
like a carrot? Like, you get there when you see it, like you want to do it, and you will once you start. But before you start, you're like, this feels like another chore, and no one likes a chore, so don't treat it like that.
So what about, can I just ask the big question? You know, okay, we're investing. KiwiSaver is just thousands of companies. It tends to be bundled up as you know, funds, and that is if you're in a growth KiwiSaver, so that's invested largely in the share markets. Whereas if you're in something slightly more conservative, it's more in cash. So I always recommend people, you know, short-term money, you've got emergency savings or a savings, make sure you've got kind of short-term money in cash. And that would be considered conservative if you were to relate it to a KiwiSaver. But anything in growth is for the long term. So share markets absolutely should be long-term, just like KiwiSaver. I feel comfortable with my KiwiSaver and growth fund because I know it's for the long term and that's invested in companies. But if I wanted to invest outside separately, age-old question, like what, is it companies? Is it funds? What kind of excites you guys or what you look at? Maybe start with Sim.
What excites me? I feel like I'm a very boring investor, and I kind of just stick to the funds. I stick to the ETFs, or exchange trade funds, which is, for those that don't know, the baskets where you've got a lot of companies put into one thing. And Sonia, my co-host, and I, we really, we joke a lot about how we run this investing podcast, but for the most part, we just stick to our boring old investing strategy. But we do like to have like 10% of our portfolio for what we call speculative investments. So in companies that we are interested in, just to, I guess, deal with the itch that you sometimes get when you do see something new and exciting and you want to give it a go, but you're not too sure and you don't want to, put all your life savings into it. So I think that's probably where I'm at, and probably a little bit more boring.
Right. Well, it's not really boring because funds are comprised of all those exciting companies. And if you don't want to pick a winner, then it's a great way to go. What about you, Tracey?
Oh, look, I think it depends on your age and stage. I mean, investing is very sort of personal. So I think it's hard to sort of generalize. I mean, you've really got to sort of assess where you're at in life, what you're sort of aiming for, how, what's your time horizon, as you sort of say, growth is more long-term, and really sort of work out a plan and stick with it. Also, seek advice. We have some great financial advisors out there. They are there to service you. You are the client. Demand that service of them. Have a discussion with them. Be very upfront. They've got legal obligations to disclose fees, etc., etc. Avail yourself of the services to get a real clear plan, and then I think you sort of stick with that plan. Investing is long term. Very important, though, as you said, to have that emergency fund and to have some money on the side in different sort of types of investments, and certainly have KiwiSaver.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracey. Hey, I'm just going to go to a question, if that's cool, because I didn't realize the time. I wonder if I'm not as nimble or as risk-taking as male investors. I'm not worried about it, but do women tend to buy low and then let the portfolio sit because that's what I'm comfortable / lazy doing? And I love that, Sim, you described yourself as a lazy investor. Actually, it's probably a smart investor, to be fair, because lots of studies have shown that women tend to be better investors. Our returns are almost 1% higher over a research study in the States out of a university. And that's because we're not trading. So we're not kind of buying some of the FOMO stocks. We're not getting into the hottest thing and then opening up our share accounts and selling and buying and selling, which erodes fees away. And quite often that's like looking to kind of beat the market. I think men generally tend to back themselves to do that, whereas women, for the most part, really busy. We want to get on with life. We want to know our money's working for us. We don't necessarily want it to be a hobby, but we do want to make sure it's getting put to work and let it work in the background. And any thoughts on that, Nat?
No, I agree. I like to be lazy. I like to be lazy when it comes to exercise. I like to be lazy when it comes to investing. I think there is the only thing I would question in that question is the idea of do women like to buy low? And I don't.
I wasn't quite sure.
There is a concept of dollar cost averaging, which is a dumb finance term, but it's basically at its simplest the idea of you invest the same amount every week, month, 3 months, whatever, in the same thing. And the share markets can do whatever they want to do. They go up, they go down, all the normal cycles. You ignore them. You focus on canceling your Apple subscription or building your best life or living your best life right now. And because every time you put in that $100, if the share price is higher, you buy a little bit less. If the share price is lower, you buy a little bit more. And there's all sorts of science involved and maths that we don't need to do because someone else has done it to show that generally you end up with a pretty good result without having to time the market. And people talk about timing the market, which is that concept of buying low versus time in the market, which is something that I think most investors feel quite strongly about. That there's a lot of evidence to suggest that trying to time the market doesn't work. No one has a crystal ball. those who do don't seem to use them for the share markets very much. So what you're best to do is just start early, pay yourself first. I think it's a brilliant concept, and put aside a regular amount of money and just get on with your life. And I think the idea that you are not as confident, or you're not, what is it, nimble? I mean, like, I think that's just such a great bias. You are probably an extremely nimble person, and you've probably make a million choices every day that you should sit down and journal about, because you're probably way more impressive than you're giving yourself credit for. But what you're putting in place is some very, very solid investing practices, which isn't about jumping in, like actually jumping in and out of things and buying and selling is actually not what I'd consider nimble so much as maybe led by emotions a lot of the time, which is not necessarily great investing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then we've got another question I'm going to direct to you, Tracey. Do you, sorry to put you on the spot, but are you where, if someone was interested in talking to a financial advisor, might they look?
Well, I think I'd start off with Financial Advice New Zealand, their website, having a look at that, or FSC. One of the things that FSC is looking to do at the moment is really promote female financial advisors, because and also get more female financial advisors in the industry. So I'd have a look at those sites, and again, ask questions of your friends and acquaintances as to sort of who they use, but make sure that you test and you use an advisor who resonates with you.
No, I love it. And then Nat, a question for you. Does that mean that you're investing in individual companies rather than index funds or exchange traded funds or managed funds? There's kind of a catch-all phrase to different types of funds.
I think someone's asked about, I think it was Belinda asking about core and conviction. We used to call, what do we used to call it, Kristen?
Sexy Islands.
Mainland.
Mainland and Sexy Islands.
And it's kind of what you said, Sim, is I believe that and there's a lot of psychology behind this. A lot of my job involves psychology, so I look into it. That this intrinsic desire to want to do something is super important. And anyone who's listening now who thinks investing is just another thing to tick off your to-do list, or like, you will open a whole world of excitement and interest as soon as you start. And so what I do, the way I set up my investments is very similar to Sim, is that I do the lazy, boring thing with most of my money. I put it in a couple of ETFs and these baskets of shares, so I don't need to worry about it. Someone else is putting it together, or an algorithm that follows the share markets and picks companies based on all sorts of things. There's some brilliant ETFs out there that basically spread your money across every company in the share markets, or a selection of them that represents the share markets. Like, I want to do that. That's boring. But I want to know that my money is spread far and wide, because I actually don't want it to be going up and down based on how one particular company is doing, because that would stress me out, and I like to sleep. But what I do think is important is I love investing, and that is something that most of my friends who've started have started to say, whereas before they probably wouldn't have said that. And the reason I love it is, going back to those stories, is I back these brands. I love, and I saw this really cool LinkedIn profile, and I'm not sure if it was photoshopped or not, but someone had like their job and then partial shareholder of Twitter. And it was just this really cool thing of like, that's what it is. Like, that is on your LinkedIn profile, that like you own this company, like you are an owner of this company. And so for me, that's really important to put, I spend money at companies that I love. I am quite an ethical spender a lot of the time. No, like not all the time, not perfect. But that I can actually back those companies in a totally different way and profit off it. Like, it's brilliant. Like, I love it.
No, that's great. And to answer the last question and to wrap up, first of all, just thank you so much, Tracey, Sim, and Nat, for joining us tonight. Sorry, we went a little bit over, but the last question is how to invest in companies. And for those that want to give Hatch a go, we've got thousands of companies on Hatch, probably brands that you know and love, and you're most welcome to sign up to Hatch. And you basically just search for a company, and you can go ahead, and it's very much like e-commerce in that you can start with a little bit, or you can just watch list it until you feel comfortable to do that. But we must have just lost Sim. It looked like she had frozen. I know she had frozen there a little bit. So but my apologies. Yeah. But so for anyone that has to, she apologizes. Her internet was funny, but that's okay. We did go over as well, so all good. Thanks, Sim. But yeah, for anyone who signs up with a link that's going to be shared to Hatch, if you invest $100, we top you up with 20, and there's plenty of companies to choose from. But look, that should, if you just start small, that should be viewed as education as well, until you've kind of start to do some research and rating and find your medium of learning. That's really important. So thank you so much for guests and for all those that have joined us. Happy rest of your evening. Happy International Women's Day. Ka kite anō. Thanks so much.